known as Sun City, but not the one with the Valley of the Waves. Joburg Correctional Services Centre there at Joburg Prison, and that's where we can find Sam this morning. Sam, hello again to you.
Good morning again, and good morning to our viewers once again. A little bit earlier, we were standing outside of Johannesburg Correctional Centre. We've now moved inside. Actually, if you come through the gates, we're to the left of the centre. And a little bit earlier, we were hearing lots of singing. I'm sure as inmates are getting into the start of their daily routine, whatever that may be, behind these high walls and, just some of the issues we're dealing with. Over the last 2 days, however, we have, and you started that conversation, an ex-offenders conference to not only redress the issues of past issues related to victims, but also to the perpetrators as well, and coming together and trying to find some kind of commonality, if you can find them, and also putting some paper together that will then be forwarded to the Minister of Correctional Services with ideas, suggestions on how to make sure that once an ex-offender, an ex-prisoner is released out of prison, that he gets reintegrated back into society in a meaningful way. Right now, I'm joined by an ex-offender, Miles Bhudu, but somebody who's been in the conversational space, in the public space, talking about rehabilitation quite openly. Mr. Bhudu, thank you very much for joining us here on Morning Live. We've seen the conference over the last 2 days. Inmates, former inmates coming together with victims, with members from the ministry, from various correctional faculties, talking about rehabilitation. But a public at large, we don't completely understand what that rehabilitation should look like.
Well, the Department of Correctional Services has got a mandate to rehabilitate those who came on the other side of the law. But our definition as an organization has completely changed with the definition that you find in the Oxford, you find in the Howard Dictionary, and the other philosophies. Our definition of rehabilitation is education. You must invest in education. It's training, skills development, and ultimately you get to this buzzword, rehabilitation. And after the product has been rehabilitated, the product needs to be reintegrated, and after that it needs to be monitored and it needs to be evaluated. And if that doesn't work, then you must then reinforce, where you call in the law enforcement agencies. Unfortunately, our communities still have to be educated, agitated and conscientized that these institutions are no more prisons that they used to be. They are no more dungeons. They are correctional facilities. And we are very, very excited that we now got a minister, a deputy minister, and a group of correctional officers that wants to steer the ship into that direction where those who has wronged society are given a second chance so that they can go back as productive, lawful, and useful citizens. It's going to take time, but it is worth trying.
That second chance, the conference that's currently underway in Pretoria, and I know you've been part of it. Second chances also means that those that have offended are honest and forthcoming in terms of that redress, but also that you have communities that are willing to give them a second chance. How do we find this middle road? How do we make sure that when a young Sam is reintegrated back into a community, that the community also understands, or parents or society at large understand the role that they play, and maybe that's where there's this grey area?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in terms of community awareness, conscientization of the community, because you must never ever say that you will never end up there. You must never ever say that your child or your next door neighbor will never end up there. I think it is now the right time for Department of Correctional Services, for government, to take this initiative and make it clear that we are standing here and talking about the rehabilitation, and we haven't forgotten about the victims of crime and criminals, and that is also another debate for another day, and the way I am optimistic, I waited almost 27 years to say what I'm ever saying, but it was worth the waiting, because the Department of Correctional Services is in transition. Like government is also in transition. They have inherited a hot potato, and this hot potato, we need to deal with it in terms of repairing, reforming, and doing what needs to be done to make sure that once you went in here, you come out and you never easily go back there.
Mr. Bhudu, we're going to leave it there, but thank you very much for joining me. Miles Bhudu, who's forming part of that ex-offenders conference that's being held currently in Pretoria. It's day 2, it's the final day today, but also sharing his insight on the concept of rehabilitation and redress, especially around perpetrators and victims. A little bit more coming from us a little bit later. Let's go back to the studio now, and if I get it right, it's sport.